it's not like human cockfighting. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of skill to it, but what it does for you physically and mentally is huge.
On this week's GMAC interview, we are delighted to be joined by Shane Monahan, founder and CEO of a new social audio app called LIMOR.
Something that's missing in society and relationships is conversation. Everyone is just so absorbed by their phone, everything is so fast paced, no one has time for anything, and they don't have time to talk to one another.
Shane was a professional rugby player, and he discusses the highs and lows, the resilience.
8 or 9 pints. Yeah. You have to drink them within a certain period of time. I think it's 30 minutes. And if you don't drink it, or if you drink it and you get sick, you have to shave your head.
So without any further ado, here's Shane Monahan.
The All Walks podcast is now in your ear.
Go live! So delighted to have you here at the Queen's in Dalkey and just have a chat. Your story is fascinating. We're going to hear about it, but let's begin. How are you getting on?
Very good. It's Dalkey, beautiful place. I've never actually been in the village, and I love history. So seeing the castles, this location is awesome.
You know, we'll talk about your involvement. I know you started in Drogheda Rugby Club, and we'll go back to that through your life as a professional rugby player. But Boyne is obviously very famous in history, and that also played a part in your life.
Massively. Like, I'm raised on the mouth of the River Boyne, the Boyne Estuary, which is, you know, apparently where St. Patrick came back to Ireland. You know, you talk about Irish culture and history and lore, folklore is very important to that, because, you know, it would be the equivalent for historians of the Irish Valley of the Kings, like they have in Egypt, because that's where Newgrange is, and there's hundreds if not thousands of, you know, ring forts, tombs, cairns, all that kind of stuff in that area, unexcavated really. Like, you walk in a field and it's like, holy shit, I'm in a ring fort.
Oh God,
you know, it's incredible. But a lot of the ancient stories of Ireland, you know, the salmon and knowledge, of course, is the River Boyne, and that story in itself. But there's definitely a thing in the water, I think, for creativity from the area and the fertile lands and all that, and that's something I love about that part of the country as well. And there's a lot of it's funny with the Dubs talking to Peter here as well on the when you talk about Drogheda, it's kind of like it's in a different country nearly. Oh Jesus, that's really far away, and they don't know much about it. But a few of my friends from Dublin, when I was in the Leinster Academy and stuff like that, you always try to get them to come up, and it'd be easier to get them to go to Spain early, you know, outside the Pale, which is another historic thing. But when they come up, they're like, holy shit, this is beautiful part of the country, and it's only 40-50 minutes up the road at the river on a day like this, a lovely sunny day. It's fantastic, the beaches, and there's just I'm very lucky when you go abroad and you come home and you get to see it. You say, Jesus, this was an amazing place.
Between your art that your fantastic art that we will talk about and mention along this chat, you're also the founder and CEO of LIMOR, which is an audio social app that is incredibly interesting, and we'll talk about what you've learned from your time in professional sport and how you've adapted that into your life now in the business world as well as an artist. But going right the way back, talk to me about life growing up for you and your brother Simon and your family in Drogheda.
And Sophie as well, she'll kill me for my sister.
And Sophie, your sister. I never met her, but I remember Simon from meeting him.
The small man that he is. What was it like? You know, I'm nostalgic at times. Maybe that comes from my love of history or whatever. You're looking back on things, and I was very, very lucky to have the childhood I had. I think the Ireland we grew up in as well. Like, I was born in '87, so late '80s, '90s as a child, I think was a great period of time to be raised in Ireland. I suppose we would be the last kind of traditional old school Catholic raised generation. I think my mother would be a very fierce woman in terms of mother bear, looking after the kids as well, which I suppose has its pros and cons as a young man when you're growing up, you know. And then my dad as well ran his own business, which was the family business, and that's where a lot of the entrepreneurial spirit comes from. My grandfather, who I mentioned, Jerry Monahan, incredibly successful man in the 50s and 60s in terms of coming from a farming background, grew up on a farm, and then got into business and retail, and you know, back in, as I said, the 50s and 60s, starting dry cleaners, which were unheard of in Ireland, and factories for manufacture of clothing, factories in Dublin, factories in Drogheda, you know, that kind of business ethic, and starting new businesses and supermarkets and all this kind of thing ahead of his time.
And your dad also was involved, am I right, in the clothing trade?
Yeah, so dad himself has a fascinating journey, and I've a lot of my resilience lessons, you know, you unbeknownst to yourself, you pick up from. He's quite stubborn. I'm very stubborn in that, in terms of not willing to concede or give up, you know. Failure is just not a word I like to even have in my vocabulary where possible. I was in selling clothes at like 6 or 7. Do you know what I mean? Literally on the floor, which I learned so much from that. You know, the ability just to talk to a child talking to strangers, probably not a good thing, but talk to strangers and learn how to sell, and you know, service and customers always right kind of stuff. And then he had an amazing journey in that he was an entrepreneur, and he came up with an idea by chance meeting Chinese Malays in Drogheda in the late 80s, and they ended up starting a clothing brand, you know, and started manufacturing clothing out in Malaysia and going to China and Southeast Asia, and you know, this mad journey, and started a brand and a business that was doing incredibly well. I think they were in like 400 outlets in the UK and stuff at one stage. And then there was a recession, I think, when the early 90s or whatever, when the sterling collapsed, and that killed that business. And then it was a kind of restart again. He's done that a few times with different businesses, and that resilience, you know, and those lessons. And like going to Russia, like he was in Russia just after the fall of the Soviet Union, and that period of time extremely dangerous. There's a story where his business partner Valerie, he went over. Just getting to Russia in itself is like planes, trains and automobiles story, and almost getting arrested because of Valerie being extremely drunk and abusing armed soldiers with Kalashnikovs. And then it turns out his father was like a mogul in I can't think of Kazan, I think in Russia, or was it Georgia? But anyway, and getting put in a hotel, and a fella being murdered that night in the room beside him, and being questioned about a murder the next morning. And he's like, holy shit, this is a setup. I'm a capitalist in Soviet Russia, and
here to sell.
I'm set up. I'm doomed. I'm never going to see this kind of stuff, you know. So those amazing stories and inspiration from that, unbeknownst to yourself. And as I said, him wanting the best for me and my brother and my sister to kind of do that kind of stuff too, you know.
Great upbringing where you literally have the world at your feet. Your dad's been through it. You've seen him going around the world, re-establishing himself, reinventing himself, and as a young kid to watch that subliminally, that's probably in the back of your mind. And now you're an entrepreneur starting out in the tech industry, and we'll discuss that later. As a young 12, 13-year-old, it was pretty clear from an early age that you were a very talented athlete, and rugby was your chosen field.
I knew what I wanted to do, or I made a decision very quickly of what I wanted to do, which is all right. When I was 12, it was 2. I loved military history, the army. I said, right, I'm either going to go join the army, join the cadets, which is physical and still, or I want to play professional rugby for Leinster and Ireland was my ultimate vision and my goal. And that's everything was focused on that then from thereafter, which, as I said, makes your decisions.
Great to have that focus.
They were all of the same mentality. It was just hunger and such a professional mindset. And that professionalism, like, we worked our asses off, like, as talented, obviously, in time, people have seen the quality of the people at a senior level, but the work rate of that squad was absolutely incredible. Like, Killiney, just down the road here, Killiney Hill on Christmas Eve, running up and down Killiney Hill sprints. You know, Big Dave Fagan, need to give him a shout out. Like, he was sub-academy, still is sub-academy, former senior strength and conditioning coach, but looking after the young lads. And the mindset, the mental attitude, it was the mindset more than anything that these lads won't break. We're going to break them or get get them to a state and rebuild them, or get them to a stage where they just won't break. It doesn't matter how tough or how difficult or the endurance. It doesn't matter. These guys' mindsets the other team will break before they do.
We'll talk about your time in the UFC world as well, because that seemed like that can only require a mindset that is special, that's tough, hard, resilient, ready to go into battle.
I'd literally just finished professional rugby. I'd just been let go from Munster. I loved UFC, MMA, I always wanted to try it. I had done a certain amount of jiu-jitsu classes, but you couldn't, obviously, as a professional athlete, go in and do fighting or stuff like that. So I wanted to try it as a new experience and that, and have a fight as well, and have that experience and see how I do there. And it was a thing I said I'd been let go from Munster, but I hadn't officially retired in my own mind, although looking back now, I was probably checked out before I even signed for Munster.
Yeah.
And I had an agent look, and I said, well, I'll do this thing, it'll keep me fit because I'll be training all the time, and if something does come up for the rugby, I'll go in and do that, you know. But ultimately it was a fantastic experience. About 6 months training, and I said, right, I'm going to do this like a professional. I'm going to train every day. I'm going to do everything just as if I'm a professional rugby player. I'm going to be a professional.
I wouldn't expect anything else knowing you.
And then eventually there was a fella who was in SBG Cork, and he'd 6 or 7 fights. He held a amateur championship, heavyweight championship belt in Wales, and in fairness to him, he said he'd step in. So I had a fight. We went in and first round TKO. So there you
Good
go.
on you, yeah.
So,
You know, I know around 2014 was when you started to have the idea, I believe yourself and your dad were chatting around the idea of what is now LIMOR.
yeah.
You've learned so much, built so much resilience, been through ups and downs, tough times, dark times, and now you're leaving that world behind. Were you ready for the next step after the Wimp to Warrior, or were you still hopeful of getting another contract?
No, it was nearly, when I didn't get the Munster contract, it was nearly kind of like a relief that I didn't.
Yeah.
In a strange way. Really, looking back, I had a very bad thing happen to me. We were training pre-season with the SAS, and we went up to train the SAS and the paratroopers up in Yorkshire on one of the hottest days of the year, about 4 or 5 hour drive in the bus. So we arrived dehydrated off the bus and basically into one of the most disgusting endurance things I've ever done in my life. I ended up getting heat stroke, and I was very close to dying as a result of it.
Yeah.
And that's the other side of it, the business aspect of the sport, which we haven't touched on. It's a business. You're a piece of meat. This was a joke we had in the Gloucester dressing room, the pits as it was known as at the time. You're a piece of meat, which you are. And that's another thing you don't realise that until you're a bit older in the business, and that comes with you then into business as well.
How old is LIMOR now?
So the original idea again happened when I was in Gloucester. So my last season, I said, a very difficult season. I was at home at Christmas with my dad and my family, and I was chatting with my dad, and he was involved in the voluntary group Drogheda, as we mentioned, my hometown. And Dad was like, is there anything we can do to get the word out there? I said, well, Dad, you know, you're a great speaker. There's some amazing people in the group. You meet amazing people all the time, business owners, politicians, etc., etc. You need to start a podcast. And he's like, what's a podcast? You know, like most people in 2014. I said, well, I explained it to him and I showed him some examples. I said, Shane, that is unbelievable. How do I do it? I said, well, like we are here now today, Dad, you need headphones, microphones, camera, you know, learn how to produce, set up, you know, website. Probably like, whoa. Too much information, I'm not interested. In seconds, literally seconds, amazing idea to not interested. And that was the seed. It's like, wow, imagine there was an app for someone like my dad. Open it up, say what you want to say, hit share and you're done. And the term less is more came to mind, that great design phrase, and that's where the name LIMOR comes from, LIMOR, playing words LIMOR Animal, which is our branding. And that was the seed. And then I took that away with me and I started the product design 10 years later, since I started that degree, and putting it into practice, the life cycle of a product. You have an idea, how do you make it a reality? So I started researching and There was very little statistics on podcasting in 2014. Problem solution, that's what product design is. Here's a problem, how can we find something to fix it? And that was the beginning of the journey. So like that transition out of rugby, like I had that transition from school, my vision was rugby. I had this thing in the back of my head that I had passion for, that I knew was a great idea, and I predicted in myself for the rugby and backed myself that this is the way things were going to go. And I said, this is what's going to happen in podcasting. Podcasting is going to explode. Voice content is going to explode. This is a market I want to get into, and this is a problem that people are going to have when it starts to explode. And all that has come to pass. So I knew that from day one. Is this going to take millions? If it's going to happen, I need to raise a lot of money.
Where do you begin to start to find funding for this adventure?
Just randomly walk down the street and ask people for money. No, it was I suppose it's like anything. It's like if you want to learn how to box, you need to find a boxing coach or people who have experience in business or that type of thing. And to be honest with you, I didn't really know what I was doing. It was kind of learn as you went along. Through my network in Drogheda, I got introduced to a gentleman who gave me a bit of guidance. He'd been successful in business previously, and he said, I have a few guys that would be interested in listening to you. And the kind of thing is like, how much money do you need? Do you understand? Like how long is a piece of string? It is very much like that when it's a brand new idea and it's in the tech space. He said, I know I need a lot of money, even to build a prototype is a lot of money. Yeah. Especially this, we're going back to like 2016. Technology's advanced so much more now. You can get a prototype up a lot quicker and for better value. So it was a case of, right, who do I know in the technology space? And I had a friend of mine who actually was a coder. So I started speaking to him and getting his advice, and he said, would you come in and help with the design side of stuff on the technology side of it? Because ultimately I'm not a coder, I'm a product designer. You know, so like I'm the guy who would draw the Jaguar E-Type and then go to an engineer, build it for him. Yeah. That's what product designers do. So I said, I want this button to do that, I want this to do that, and they build it and they come back and go. So that's kind of, I'm the orchestra, in an orchestra, I'm the conductor, let's say. That's the way of looking at it. So then it was a case of having an idea, a way of explaining your vision. Because you have a vision, you know exactly what it is, other people don't. It's like you as a coach, I have a vision of the way I want the team to work, and then you're trying to explain it to 22 people, and 5 people might get like that, and the rest of them are kind of like, oh.
Yeah, very interesting and daunting at the same time, having to likely present to people in the tech industry and the business world.
When you go in, a lot of the time they're not even investing in the idea, they're investing in you. That's how it works at early stage businesses. Doesn't matter how good the idea is, if they don't like you, they're not going to give you their money. End of. And
are we talking hundreds of thousands?
And you're looking around the early stage mark, around 10 to 15k mark.
Okay.
You know,
so
manageable. And for guys, you know, they're all high net worth individuals or guys who have a bit of cash to take a gamble on, because it's do not invest what you cannot afford to lose. End of. In regards to that, but still, it's a lot of money. To have the faith in someone to put in their business and their idea and their vision. And then usually what happens at that kind of level, if you get one guy who likes the idea and is thinking of doing it, most business people at that level, if they're smart, will try and spread the risk, spread the load. So they'll go in, right, if I can get my group of guys, I have 2 or 3 or 4 guys who are at the same level financially as myself, if I can get them to throw in 10 grand each, I'll do it. And then you go and they'll talk, I'm thinking about this, and it's go, yeah, that's a good idea, you doing it? Oh, I trust your judgment. You've done it, yeah, I looked at your, that's a good idea. Yeah, fuck it, we'll do it too. So then very quickly you go from 10, 30, 40, 50, 60, and you introduce a few other guys, and that's how you would. So there's pros and cons to this as well, though. My value at the beginning is the equity in the business, because you start off with 100% and you're actually selling your business, you're selling your idea, you're selling your vision, you're selling your dream. So you have to be very, very careful on those types of people, because you could go to them, I'll give you 50 grand. Oh, great, there's 50 grand. And they're an asshole. Or they're not a good person, and they genuinely want. Did
you have that?
No. I've been very lucky in that sense, but strategic as well. Because again, you don't just, if you can help it, you don't just want people to give you money. You want people who can invest money, but also invest skills and network to open the doors. It again, coming back to the sport, I went from being a player to being a selector stroke coach. I'm selecting my team. I need to get the best players. He can be a winger, he can be an out half, or he can do this position. He has a skill set that this guy doesn't have. So the money in the pot allows it to happen, but they can open doors, because you're always thinking about the next game next week. We have to win the championship. Well, how do we get there? And it says, right, step by step, raise money. Then you have to build a prototype. To raise more money to actually build the actual product, then you need to have money to cover legals. You need to, all these different things. And you learn along the way, oh shit, I didn't realise I needed money for that.
Steep learning curve. Explain for those listening, what is LIMOR exactly?
Exactly. LIMOR is a toolkit. It's an app and a platform that allows you to instantly record, edit, and share your voice or podcast straight from your phone, anywhere, anytime. It's easy, instant, and very importantly, it's interactive, which means it's interactive podcasting. We record a podcast, say I bump into Mike Tyndall at Kingsholm and Jim Hamilton, the two boys come over. We record a 5-minute podcast about the game. I instantly share it. People can listen to that and leave us voice comments. We can listen and then we can reply to them instantly, and everyone else can hear that, and they can, in their own time, reply to those comments. It's asynchronous as well, it's not live. So it allows you to build a relationship with your listeners, something that is very difficult to do with traditional podcasting now.
It's interesting now because it appears from dealing with young players and players through my previous role when I was at Yale University in America, that they struggle to pick up a phone and talk to people. Everything is they prefer to text. And it's turned into an increasing barrier. And to have a company like yourself and an app like yourself that's actually encouraging that verbal communication is something I believe is the right steps for society as well, that it's needed.
Massively, and that ties into why podcasts are starting to explode, is because it's something that's missing in society and relationships, that there is conversation. Everyone is just so absorbed by their phone, everything is so fast paced, no one has time for anything, and they don't have time to talk to one another. Oh, I need to go, or because your phone is always, case in point. Oh, I'm expecting a phone call, or I got a text message, and it's distracting and pulling people out of conversation, whereas podcasts, and where you consume them, that's the great thing. So in your car, like I was listening to a podcast on the way down here this morning. Average 80% of people listen to a podcast a week. On average, 6 hours and 39 minutes worth of time.
Wow, it's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time.
But
you think about that, it's an hour and a half for me to drive down here. That's an hour and a half. And I'll listen to an hour and a half on the way back. It's 3 hours, bang. Today, if I repeat that every day of the week.
Where you are at the moment, are you in a good place? Are you happy with where you are? Have you reached more than you expected, or are you behind where you think you could have been?
No, I'm definitely not where I wanted to be. Definitely not. Yeah, I heard a very good phrase from a guy who tried to get involved and raise money from in the early days, is you can't boil the ocean. No matter how good your idea is, you just can't do it all at once, So you have to be try and be as sniper focused as you can be, and I've made a lot of mistakes in terms of trying to boil the ocean at times, even on product features, building features on the product that this is needed now where it's not needed now, and that's the thing about the design process and in life. Every decision, is it a need or is it a want?
Yeah, they're very different.
The other thing then we haven't even touched on, how does this make money? Because that's ultimately what investors.
Well, how does it make money?
Well, that was a question I found very hard to answer at the beginning. Ultimately, again, this is the B2C versus B2B model. We have built LIMOR Enterprise, which is for corporates, which are the only people currently, outside of people like yourself, creative and that, who are really want to spend money and get into the space in a big way. And that's the thing with me. I suppose what I'm doing, I don't have a wife or kids like yourself, and this is the sacrifices, the benefits, the pros and cons. you know, ultimately that's what it's about. You know, if we look at having a family and kids, and that's what's most important. But as I said, following a vision or having a goal is very important, I feel, for men in particular. For us, is if you're driven, you have to have something, that top of the mountain that you have to strive towards, that keeps you motivated to provide for your family and kids.
Yeah.
But I'm in a position now where the sacrifices I'm making, it's only, like the MMA thing again, singular. It's for me. I'm making sacrifices and other things ultimately for a greater vision that can allow for things later on in life, you know. But yeah, so the enterprise, just to finish on what it does. So essentially, one thing that we've introduced in terms of the ease of use, like, so now instead of having your studio is your phone is your studio, you take it with you anywhere, you know. And I'm not building LIMOR to replace traditional podcasts, because I love traditional podcasts and what we're doing now. There's nothing that competes with kind of like sitting down in long form, but it means that we could still do this in your house. So I could go next week and say, listen, Greg, this happened, can we talk about this over a cup of coffee or in a coffee shop, and instantly share it. There's a time of it. It cuts down production time too. And then you can talk to people. As I said, someone can leave a comment, and as I said, you could get a voice comment from Jim Hamilton, and you've built a relationship with Jim Hamilton over this. But for the corporates, we offer that. But we've also, with LIMOR Enterprise, is, to my knowledge, there's nothing like it in the world, in the space, is you sell a corporate profile. So this is our revenue model. So an example, a newspaper. We'll just take the Irish Times. Okay, we're not sponsored by them yet on this podcast, but when you do get sponsored by them, they would purchase the Irish Times profile. And with that, you get a content management system, you get a higher functionality on the back end dashboard. You can upload pre-recorded content as well, not just on the go audio from the app. But you get consultancy and support, that accountability, like your Mike, like your Peter, to support these corporates, because they will fail unless they have support. End of. They're not creatives, they're not production houses, they're a bank, or they're, you know, a finance house. So we help that at the higher level. But what's very unique about it is you have the ability to link accounts. So at the Irish Times, they get their corporate profile, say they have 100 journalists, they set up their personal LIMOR account, they get linked to the corporate account, they have 100 podcasters instantly, anywhere, anytime, straight
Brilliant.
from their phone.
Jesus, clever.
So, but they can also engage in the voice comments on behalf of the newspaper. So say the entertainment journalist is in LA, he can go to Colin Farrell on the red carpet. Why didn't you win an Oscar for this movie? Banshees of Inisfree. Publish, share. Then someone simultaneously at the same time in Twickenham at Six Nations game, record, share. It's instantaneous. But someone asks the question to the entertainment journalist, they're off sick. Another journalist can reply on their behalf, because they're all linked and notified, and it allows everyone to be a voice content creator at the same time, and upskilling them at the same time, and spreading risk. Instead of having a podcast show where you have one host, if that host is gone or leaves the company, oh shit, we have to start again and find a replacement. Everyone in the organization potentially could record content. So that's LIMOR Enterprise, and that's our revenue, and we're working with some big corporates, thankfully. It's a long lead process as well, you know, because it's a higher ticket item. Sales process, that's another thing I learned about. Lead time for sales is long. You could be talking to people for 2 years before they bite, you know, which has been the case with me. But now we're at the stage with, I'm not trying to sell podcasts anymore or explain what a podcast is anymore. People see the value in it, they see the need for it, and they see our offering and they go, yeah, we tried to do the podcast thing ourselves, didn't work, we need help, we love the idea of this, we see how it can be used, let's talk, and go from there. So
and is the pot of gold for you that Meta or a company in Silicon Valley just ring you up and say, look, I want to buy your idea, we're going to give you X amount of money for that? Is that the pot of gold?
I get asked this all the time. Obviously, financially you want to do well in life because it gives you freedom. It's not money for the sake of money, it gives you freedom to do the stuff you want to do and look after your family and friends, essentially. That's the way I look at financial success. But I say I want to take LIMOR as far as I can take it. It's the best way I can answer that question. If someone says we want to write you £100 million check, I'm willing to talk.
Yeah. Maybe. Okay.
But it is, and that's generally what happens because it's with more success comes more risk. As you talked about in the rugby, it's the same. The more successful the business comes, the higher the risk comes, the higher the stress, the higher the financial input, potential financial loss, and that side of it as well. So there's lots of different reasons. It's not, I can still take it a lot further. So that's not going to be happening anytime soon.
So you still have a good runway to go?
For me personally, definitely for the business, without a doubt. Like LIMOR is nowhere near the potential it has, nowhere near. So we've some very exciting things happening in the background at the moment, both from strategic partnerships with tech partners at a very, very high level to evolve the product. Companies we're talking to in terms of getting on as customers, and that helps as well because again, people are risk averse.
Super.
So they say, well, who? No one wants to be first, which is another thing. Companies don't want to be the first to innovate because they're very hesitant to make a mistake. If we invest money in this and it doesn't work well, egg in our face kind of thing. But if other companies have done it before them and they can see how it works, then they're more likely to do it. So
makes sense.
It does. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at now.
So somebody listening to this now, they can go into their app store and just download the LIMOR app, correct?
Correct. App Store or Google Play, and they can set up a personal account. It's free to use. You can instantly record, share content.
You're putting together the foundations of a product that when it is ready for the spend to be more on advertising and marketing is when you'll see the returns. Like there's a famous, being an ex-business studies teacher, it's a very famous story you tell, which you can have two of the exact same suits. One of them is in the window in Grafton Street, and the other one is down the lane around the corner in the window of a shop that doesn't look very inviting. You know which one people are going to buy. So the key thing for you in the next stage is to try and put yourself more in the shop window to compete with
it is. It's the awareness on, for the type of business we are, and marketing is expensive. It takes spend $1 million to generate 2 or 3 million. That's kind of it's high percentage required. We've never done that. We've done marketing. Any marketing we've done has been very low spend, organic, done very well for what it is, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be in that regards. And that's what we're in the race. People are starting to open up again in terms of, we've had some fantastic investment talks recently.
Great to hear that. But it's such a fascinating story to go from where you've come from through the world of professional sport, being the artist, creating this vision as a tech entrepreneur, to now be right in the depths of it, trying to make it all work. You got to do us a favor. You're going to have to come back in.
I'd love to come back
at some stage in the future,
Yeah.
when we can look back on what has been a significantly innovative tool, hopefully for lots of people to use. And I want to wish you all the success, and thank you so much for coming on board and coming in today.
Thanks, Greg. We never even got to dive into our relationship, how we know each other. But before we finish, I do have to say, talking about the singular and MMA and the team sport aspect of sport, I'm only here now. The company is only alive because of the team as a coach and a selector I've built around me, of amazing people that have taken the risk on me, which is a huge thing, and the responsibility that helps me drive, as I said, to give that 100%. And obviously my parents, again, the lessons learned and the support from them, my family, people involved in the actual build of LIMOR, and I have to give a shout out to my business partner and his chairman of the board, Graham Began, has done an unbelievable.
Graham Began.
Don't
know.
Yeah, you will. I've learned a hell of a lot. I talk about business mentor as well. I've learned so much from him too. And then Warren Kavanagh. Warren has been huge.
Great fella.
A massive guy in terms of the build and the tech. So there's obviously a lot more names, and I'll touch on them hopefully in the next episode with you, part two. But listen, pleasure. What you're doing is amazing. You've a hell of a story as well.
Well, I like to listen to other people's stories, and having the likes of yourself to come in and tell your story is just, it's great. It really is. It's lovely to sit back and listen to somebody who you saw them when they were a young fella trying out in the world of professional sport, and now you see them going into the world of tech and taking everything that you've learned along the way with you, and seeing a personality come out, that's what makes me most impressed. That's why I want to bring you onto the show and have a chat. So thanks very much.
Brilliant, Greg. Thank you.
Produced by the Melrose Future Company.